The Mercedes A-Class, a now widely known entry-level car into the Mercedes brand. Made since 1996, the Mercedes A-Class has gone through a few different iterations now, but this model in front of me was the first to take on the traditional VW Golf hatchback shape. What I'd like to know is this a proper Mercedes in terms of its quality and comfort, or is it a Renault with a Mercedes badge on the front? Before we start the video, if you could give it a like, and why not subscribe to our channel so you can see some more of our stock. My name's Tommy, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Thankfully, although the new Mercedes A-Class certainly does use a 1.3 litre Renault engine, this one has a proper Mercedes-built 2.1 litre diesel. This unit's got 134 brake horsepower and a healthy 300 Nm of torque. This engine has been used across the Mercedes range in varying outputs like the Mercedes C220 and the C250, so theoretically it shouldn't feel underpowered. In the front you'll find a mishmash of new and now very old tech. The seats are part leather and part Alcantara, so it should hold you in place when you're going around tight corners. However, unlike the Audi A3, this car doesn't have the same seats as its peers. Having said that, the steering wheel and the dials are the same as what you'd get in a C-Class, so quality there is very good. The centre dash area is where things get a bit weird though. You have a good looking UI and a nice control wheel, but underneath is a super outdated number pad, which even for a 2016 car is really outdated. And I wonder if any A-Class owner has ever actually used it. Please let me know in the comments below if you have. Below the weirdness is more of what you'd expect from a posh manufacturer. There's galvanised metal switches for your heated seats and climate controls, and then some perfectly damped cubby holes for your stuff. Moving into the back, there's an okay amount of room, about the same as a BMW 1 Series or an Audi A3. If you do have slightly larger children, the Golf does feel a little bit more spacious. The seats themselves are pretty comfy, and quality certainly does come through to the back as well. Then onto the boot. Although it's got a slightly awkward shape, it still does have 341 litres of luggage space, which is plenty of room for a couple of large suitcases or 4 small ones. Now we've had a look around the car, let's take it for a drive and see what it's like on the road. Okay, so driving the 2016 Mercedes A-Class. We're going to do some driving around town, then on the motorway, and then finally we're going to do some twisty road driving. Bit of a test on the curbs there, seems to do quite well. Let's see what it's like over these bumps. Yeah, so you can tell it's slightly more softly sprung than the Audi A3 and the BMW 1 Series. You certainly wouldn't want to be going quickly over these bumps. Steering feels quite light, but nice and direct as well, actually. Okay, let's see what this car's like at parking. Being a small car, it should be relatively easy to manoeuvre. As if we can find a parking space. I don't know why it's so busy today. Here we go. These cars do come standard with a reverse camera, and I actually think I know why that is. The view out the rear view mirror isn't that good because the window is quite small. Because you've got those big C-pillars there, it's quite hard to see where you are, especially looking behind yourself. But with a reverse camera, it's fairly easy. There's also this fairly neat parking sensor idea, where you've got one here on the dash, and then you've actually got one on the ceiling behind you, and these light up and beep like normal parking sensors, but it means you're not having to look at the center screen to see how close you are to an object. You just look in your rear view mirror, where you'd be looking anyway, or looking over your shoulder. and then in front of you you're just looking at the dash. Pretty neat idea, really. Okay, let's keep going, and we're going to get on the motorway in a bit. Coming out of junctions, even in eco, it's fine. The gearbox is a dual clutch system, similar to what you'd find in a VW Golf. So it's like the DSG system, basically. The engine, although it's only got 134 horsepower, because it's a diesel, you do get 300 newton meters of torque. So there's plenty of feeling of power to be had. Certainly not quick, but you'll do 0 to 60 in about 8.5 seconds in this car, which is plenty for most people. We're going to be coming onto the motorway in a bit, so I'm going to reset the trip computer now, and we'll see what kind of MPG we get on the motorway. On the Mercedes website, it actually says you get 62.4 combined, so we should see a figure slightly above that with the cruise control on at 70. But if it does do that figure, I'll be very impressed, to be honest, because at the end of the day, this is still quite a big engine. Another cool feature this car has is hill hold assist, so when you come to a stop, you just push the brake slightly and then it'll say hold on the dash if you look in the top of the screen. And basically this means you can take your foot off the brake and you don't need to keep it on the brake when you're at a standstill to stop the car from moving forwards. We're just coming up to a roundabout now and we're in the national speed limit, so I'm going to put the car into sports mode. Even though this is a 2-litre diesel, this does actually have a sports mode. And what this does is it sharpens up the throttle response, makes the steering a little bit heavier, and it holds onto the gears slightly longer. So coming off this roundabout, plant your foot, and you can just ride that wave of torque all the way up to 70 miles an hour. And there you go. It's not breakneck acceleration, but it's certainly good enough for everyday use, I think. Coming onto the motorway, even in eco mode, it still feels fairly responsive. It doesn't totally ruin the throttle pedal. And it has what a lot of other transmissions have these days, is when you lift off the throttle, it'll actually disengage the gear. So you notice I'm off the throttle now, it drops the revs and you'll actually coast. Okay, now we're on the motorway. We're going to set the cruise control to whatever the speed limit is on the M25. Currently 60 miles an hour. And we'll see what MPG we can get. Now we are on the motorway, it gives us a chance to talk about some of the other things about this car. So in terms of seating position, it's okay. Because it doesn't have as good a seats as the Mercedes C-Class, they're not quite as comfortable. Even though they are as supportive, they just seem to have slightly less cushioning in them. In terms of interior quality, all Mercedes are pretty good, to be honest. You've got soft touch materials on the door card, you've got some on the dash, you've got Alcantara on the door card, and there's even squishier materials down near the bottom of the car as well, which you don't get on some other cars. The only scratchy plastics in here are on the centre dash, which isn't particularly great, to be honest. The plastic itself is very low quality, and I'd like to see some better materials used there. In terms of wind noise, it's okay. Again, it's not quite as good as the Audi A3. It's about the same as a BMW 1 Series. And I do notice quite a lot of wind noise coming from the wing mirror area here. And I have driven the new A-Class, and that's certainly a lot better inside when it comes to things like noise. Tyre noise is totally fine. If anything, it's actually slightly better than the BMW, although yet again the Audi A3 just has a little bit better refinement when it comes to driving on the motorway. In In terms of visibility, as I mentioned before, out the back window it's not quite as good as the Audi. It is about the same as the BMW, so it's not absolutely terrible. And you do have to look over your shoulder when you're changing lanes because the B pillar is also quite big. The view out the front though is actually better than the other two because this pillar here is kind of triangular shaped, so it's got kind of a sharp edge here, so there's a bit better visibility out there compared to its competitors. And now we're stuck in traffic. Pretty normal for the M25. Another thing this car is not quite as good as its competitors is the armrests are slightly too low down for me, I find. BMW is the best in this regard, as you can get the seat really, really low, so your arms kind of just fall naturally onto the armrests. The Audi A3 gets an adjustable armrest, so you can adjust the height into 3 different stages, whereas this just gets one that moves forwards and backwards. Would be nice to see a bit more adjustment there. We're still stuck in traffic, and it looks like we're going to be stuck in traffic until we come off the motorway. But even driving at 40 miles an hour, we're getting 48.7 miles to the gallon. So I do think at about 65, 70 miles an hour, you'll probably see into the 60s. We're going to do another test on the way back as well, because I want to give this car a fair chance. Okay, we're coming off the motorway now. We're going to see what this car's like when I do a bit of twisty road driving. Using the pedal shifters is actually quite rewarding in this car because the gearbox, being a dual clutch, is quite responsive. And the engine seems to pull all the way through the rev range quite nicely. Even for a large engine, it sounds pretty smooth. Usually you'd think a big diesel engine like this in a small car, they wouldn't be able to fit a lot of sound deadening in, but they've managed it quite well, to be honest. Okay, so we finally made it to some slightly twistier roads. We're going to put the car back into sports mode and see what it's like. You can actually turn the traction control off in these cars, but there's not much point, to be honest, because the ESC is still on, so it'll still stop you from sliding the car around, and you don't really want to do that anyway in this car. Downshift through the gears ourselves. Will it upshift for us? Yes, it will. Car still feels fairly sure-footed, not quite as good as the BMW. Let's see what it's like over this bump here. Yeah, pretty good really. And it'll still get to the speed limit at a reasonable pace. You do notice the front end does want to give out quite easily though. Having said that, this isn't on the sportiest tyres, so that could be one of the reasons why. Turning circle's pretty good. Definitely a more comfort orientated car though. You do notice when you land over bumps, the car seems to jiggle about a bit. It's like there's a little bit more jelly in the suspension than a BMW 1 Series. Okay, we're going to take the motorway back again and see what our final MPG figure is, and then we're going to talk about finance, because after a couple of years of depreciation, these Mercedes A-classes go from being ridiculously expensive to actually quite affordable cars. Okay guys, we're back at the dealership now. Driving around town on the motorway, doing a little bit of sporty driving on some back roads, and then back on the motorway again. We did manage to do about 70 miles an hour on the way back. We got a figure of 52.3 miles to the gallon. Pretty good really. Not quite the claim figures, but anything above 50 when you're doing a variable amount of driving is pretty good, to be honest. You're not going to get much better than that in any other car. So the big question of the video, is this a proper Mercedes then? Well, I have to say there are some parts that are not quite as good as you'd expect them to be. As I mentioned earlier, the plastics down here aren't quite that nice, and this kind of stuff here, it just looks a bit weird to me. But everything you actually touch feels like a proper Mercedes. So the steering wheel, door cards, you get a nice handle up here, visor's nice, and the infotainment screen is also exactly the same as what you'd get in a C-Class, so I can't knock it there. The seats, whilst they're not the same as the C-Class, they're not quite as comfortable, but they are quite good still. So yeah, I would say this is a proper Mercedes. And if you're looking at buying something like this, the good thing about this compared to like a C-Class or an E-Class is on finance, you could put no money down whatsoever, so no deposit, and you'd pay £249 a month, which for a luxury car is nothing really. I mean, when this car was new, you'd probably be looking at about £4,000 down, £449 a month. And just after 4 years, you know, this car's done, I think it was 46,000 miles, so it's, you know, only been through one major service. The engine still runs really well, everything still feels brand new in here, and you'd be paying way less per month on finance. And this isn't even a base spec car, this is the AMG line premium, so you get electric folding mirrors, you get fully electric windows, you get heated seats, you get parking sensors, reverse camera, you get better suspension, you get bigger wheels, you get nice paint. There's not a lot that you don't get. The only thing that it's missing is the panoramic roof, which would be a nice option, especially if you're sitting in the back. But again, for $249 a month with no deposit, good fuel economy, nice engine, good enough power, quiet on the motorway, I don't think there's a much better deal for a Mercedes when it comes to something like that. And if you do want to get into the brand, you know, people usually pick BMW, Audi or Mercedes. But if you are, you know, a brand person and you just really want a Mercedes and you don't have a massive budget, this is a really good first car, I think. I can't fault it that much. So yeah, I'm going to wrap up the video here. As always, if you liked it, give it a like, and why not subscribe to our channel so you can see some more of our stock. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.